Hey there, I'm James Magpie, and 9,133,162 equals 2,049 y squared. This probably looks like something that fell out of your algebra homework, but it's actually a sentence, meaning I made Mathlang. What is Mathlang? Let me explain. The original version of Mathlang was invented in around 2022, when I was unmedicated in the middle of calculus class. The concept was simple. Could I make a language where each sentence appeared to be a legitimate mathematical equation? The version of Mathlang presented today is a revised version that I began working on in February of 2025. It bears very little resemblance to the original in function, but the concept is the same. How does it work? Like this. Okay, there's a lot going on here. Let's start with some basics. First, the lexicon. The words look like random numbers at a glance. There's a system to them, which we'll break down with a few examples. One thing worth mentioning here is that Mathlang is primarily a written language. It can be read out loud, as I did earlier, but this is sometimes ambiguous, usually slow and unhelpful, and would require far too many takes for me to say everything correctly. So I'll be putting examples on screen for you to look at yourself while I talk about it in English. Each word consists of a single-digit prefix and one or more three-digit lexical sequences, often written with commas separating them for clarity, conveniently in the same places they would be in a large number. Notice how these two have different prefixes but the same lexical code, and the meanings are related. That's part of the system. These roots are, in fact, encodings of Toki Pona words, derived from the values for Sitalan Pona in the under-conscript Unicode registry. In the unlikely chance you're watching this and haven't heard of Toki Pona, I'll link a good video on the topic however YouTube allows. This video should be understandable with little to no prior knowledge. There are a total of 120 roots used in Mathlang. These are not exactly the same 120 as Toki Pona classically has. Some grammatical particles and Toki Pona specific words are not used, while several later additions are included. So back to our example words, here are the Toki Pona equivalents to their roots, along with approximate English translations. What about the prefixes? Where Toki Pona words are very broad in meaning, Mathlang is a bit more precise. Each prefix indicates a semantic field and part of speech, which pairs with the lexical codes to form a meaning, and compounding can add more specificity. The prefixes 1 and 2 mark verbs, and specify whether that verb is transitive or intransitive. These can be remembered because the prefix is the same as the number of arguments. Next, 3 marks adverbs, adpositions, and anything else that doesn't quite fit into another lexical category, while 4 is used for adjectives. Prefixes 5 through 9 are all noun classes. 5 is used for humans, 6 for animals and body parts, and 7 for inanimate objects. 8 is a bit harder to define, but generally includes locations, materials, and mass nouns. Finally, 9 is used for abstract nouns. Since 0 isn't a prefix, no word starts with a digit that could be dropped. Combining these prefixes with the lexical code derives a wide variety of meanings, with all the different words on the right here coming from just 4 different roots. Though not every root has a meaning that makes sense with every prefix. Like 026, cold, in the human class would mean what? Someone with bad circulation? A snowman, but specifically a living one? I'm not sure. Returning to our sample words, you can now see how the top 2 use prefixes to derive different meanings from the same root, while the bottom 2 are compounds which combine multiple roots to form more specific meanings. Compounds can be made up of any number of roots, with 2 elements being the most common, but one word of the translation will get up to 4. Now that you have some understanding of the lexicon, let's move on to the grammar. Here are 2 simple sentences that we're going to break down for examples. The word order is SOV. Each noun is marked with a case particle. The plus sign marks the subject with the ergative case, and the equals marks the object with the absolutive case. Being an ergative language, the sole actor of an intransitive verb, like to sleep, is marked with the absolutive case, the same as the object of a transitive verb. This means that every sentence contains an equals sign. To complete our basic sentences, there's one last element we haven't covered. Verbs must agree with their subject in person, with the third-person marker being X. The first-person marker is Y, and the second person is Z. Despite the ergative case marking, agreement follows a nominative pattern, marking the subject of a transitive verb and the sole actor of an intransitive verb. These sentences also include pronouns, which are single digits. 1 and 2 for first and second person, 3 and 4 for demonstratives, and the noun class prefixes for third person, like the 5 here being used for a class 5 human noun. However, you might notice that the pronouns and agreement markers are largely redundant here. If the ergative argument of a sentence is a pronoun, it can optionally be dropped. Plural pronouns are often maintained, since verb agreement does not include number, and third-person pronouns might be kept if the noun class is important. In this first example, dropping the pronoun is grammatically fine, but loses some information. The previous examples were also unspecified for number after dropping the pronouns, but without other context, the more common interpretation would be singular. Absolutive arguments can never be dropped, even if agreement on an intransitive verb makes them redundant. Now to dive deeper into verb morphology, we're going to go through some variations on these sentences. An unmarked verb is in the present tense, while the suffixes squared and cubed mark past and future tense, respectively. Transitive verbs can also take the passive suffix e, which shifts the forms of tense and agreement marking somewhat. This could act as an intransitive verb with the original object as the sole argument, though the verb maintains the transitive prefix, as shown in the first example, or the original subject can be reintroduced in object position, as in the second example. Verbs can also take the negative prefix, which is, well, it's a negative sign. This can be applied to adjectives too, though that's less common. That's it for verb marking. Now let's look a little closer at nouns. Number marking, as you might expect from a language made of numbers, is quite detailed, distinguishing singular, dual, paucal, and plural. Each is marked with a suffix. Some of these suffixes are identical to the ones used in verb marking, but since they're applied to different parts of speech, no confusion is likely to happen. Adjectives are placed below nouns with a horizontal line separating them. Verbs can also be placed here to form participles, which take tense and passive marking, but do not take agreement marking. If multiple adjectives are used, all but the last take the modifier circumfix, which consists of a pair of parentheses. That modifier circumfix has a lot of uses, another important one being possession. If a noun or pronoun is placed in parentheses before another noun, it is interpreted as a possessor. Nominal conjunction also uses the modifier circumfix and can be distinguished from possession by the conjoining suffix pi. Finally, the modifier suffix can be used for relative clauses. Like participles, relative clauses take tense and passive marking, but not agreement marking. However, a relative clause can take an argument which precedes the verb and is marked with the ergative particle, even though it is grammatically the object. The head noun must be the verb's subject, though the passive can be used for an object-like meaning. Next up, adverbs. When modifying an adjective, they precede the adjective and take the modifier circumfix. When modifying a verb, they usually follow the verb, but may precede it for emphasis. Either way, they are separated with the particle plus. This is identical to the ergative particle, and researchers posit a historical connection between the two uses. The last three words also include adpositions, or more precisely, underpositions. An adposition is placed below its object, similarly to an adjective. If the object is modified by an adjective, it follows the adposition, just like if multiple adjectives were used. An adpositional phrase can be placed in adverbial position to modify a verb, or it can take the modifier circumfix and be placed before a noun. Next, there are a few phrasal structures that are relevant to today's translation. Copular constructions, whether equating two nouns or a noun and an adjective, can be considered to have a null verb, with the verb marking simply sitting on its own. Like any transitive sentence, an ergative pronoun can be dropped, as seen in the bottom example. Finally, the imperative is indicated by replacing the absolutive particle with a greater than sign, something which researchers hypothesize evolved from the fusion of the absolutive particle with some preverbal marker. Similarly, the prohibitive uses a less than sign. Both are typically used in the second person present tense, but can be used with any person in tense for a deontic meaning of should. In fact, this may be considered the core meaning. The first sentence here could equally be translated as "you should eat the pastry." That's all the elements of grammar that are relevant to today's translation, but there's plenty more to cover, including questions, loanwords, dialectal differences, poetics, and more. If there's interest, I might make a follow-up video in the future. For now, though, let's move on to the translation. A quick note on the format of this section. As mentioned previously, reading Mathlang out loud is terrible, but simply letting the translation play in silence is boring, so I will be reading out a close English translation. I've also included some sidebars, like this one, to show the structure of particularly interesting or complex compounds that occur in the text. If I go too fast and you want to look more closely at anything, the pause button is your friend. With that said, the serpent is amazing. It certainly will not weave itself to the infinite loom, and it will not join the ruining and rebirthing wheel without end. My God, its jaws bite its own flesh. Its fangs stab powerfully into its own tail. It chews its bones in the manner of time's own ribs. It drinks its own marrow as if draining eternity. It is a beast that devours and is devoured, and a whisper swallowed by its own echo. See the slithering tail-eating reptile. It speaks the truth of time's unbroken dirge. It curls within my heart and the world's heart, now and forever. And that's it. Thanks for watching, and thanks to today's sponsor, Birds. They're watching too.